Right, we're good to go.
I'm ready to go.
Right, good. So, welcome everybody. This is, I think, number 6 in our 7. Sorry, this is webinar number 7 in our insight events, where we bring an NED with experience of a certain world sector, in this case technology, to join us to discuss some of their insight and what's going on in this very interesting world at the moment. And it's headed up, as always, by our now infamous NED for NEDs in Chris Ravenscroft. And I think today what we're looking at is to both, for Phil, who's got a number of things he wants to cover and topics he wants to cover today, but equally we'll do a little bit of Q&A along the way as well. I think topics we've covered so far have been really interesting. I think last week was the good, the bad, the ugly of private equity. I think that one went down very well. We did the post-COVID, and how to shift your focus. And actually, it's quite interesting to hear that what was talked about at the very start of COVID by Mr. McGrath actually has served us well as a business, but actually has played out probably in a very similar way to the way he envisaged. So that was a good one. And then we had simplify your business as well, and your business model with Paul Gilbert, amongst others. So they've all gone down well. And from our side, we're delighted. Delighted, in fact, to welcome Phil Mail, who's a living legend when it comes to technology. I believe it's right, Phil, the 3rd person on the internet.
Not quite, not the 3rd.
How many? You were up there with the very early, weren't you?
243rd.
That's close, though. That's close. You've actually got an IP number that's better than everybody else's, but a true tech legend. So I'll let you tell more about that. And today, the main topic of the conversation is scaling your business up through technology. Which in the current world where many people are working from home, people have completely changed their buying patterns, working patterns, everything could never be more absolutely relevant. So we're looking forward to speaking to you and hearing from you, Phil. If you have got questions, there's a little button there that you can press to put your questions out there. You can either send them to the group, don't mind that, creates a little bit of banter, or you can send them direct to either Raj or Chris independently. And we'll feed those into the conversation. But I'll now pass you over to Chris. We'll give you a little bit more about the format and, most importantly, introduce Phil.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Paul. And thanks to everybody for joining this evening. It's good to see a lot of people out there. I'm not sure how many we've got because I've got 2 screens, so I can't see everybody. But welcome. As Paul has said, I look after the non-exec practice within Rowan, as well as working along C-suite roles as well. I've worked with Rowan for 5 years, but at the same time, I've also got a number of my own non-exec roles with SMEs around the Northwest. I've been involved in businesses that have now been sold on, but I'm also continuing to run a couple of NED roles alongside what I'm doing with Rowan. So it's a really interesting insight to be working with NEDs, but also being an NED. It's great to learn from each other because we all do things slightly differently, and it's really great to have Phil along this evening because I'm a complete. Whilst I have an IT team who work with me in one of the businesses I work, 2 of whom are on the screen at the moment. I'm not really terribly au fait with IT and the digital world. I've been around too long. I should be more up in it, but I'm learning as I go. So having Phil along this evening is great. Somebody who's been involved in a whole range of businesses in content, media, internet, and telecommunications. I think you've got about 30 years behind you, Phil, which I'll let you explain. But you've been on the boards of publicly listed companies, FTSE 100, FTSE 250, as well as private businesses. You've been involved in non-exec roles. I'll let you explain the non-exec roles you have at the moment, but you've done a number of those, very often in tech businesses, but using disruptive technologies. Some backed by private equity, some not. You founded your own businesses. I'm surprised you've got hair, actually. I haven't, but you have. But yours is a little greyer than mine, I think. At least if I had any, I might have less grey hair, I don't know. Anyway, suffice to say, as Paul says, you're a bit of a legend in the industry, so it's great to have you here. We're going to cover, I think that there are sort of 3 areas we're going to cover which were mentioned in the invitation. One around having the right skills on your board to support the development and delivery of a tech-based digital strategy. You and I had a fairly lengthy discussion the other day about raising capital in the current climate, which I think is also interesting. And I know you've got what you described to me as the big questions. I didn't ask you what they were, but so it's going to be a surprise to me as much as to you. Sorry, it's not to you, but it's going to be a surprise to me. You know what those key things are that we might worry about, that we need to ensure we get right as we move forward. So I'm going to hand over to you to give us a little bit of a background to you and where you've come from, and then we'll open up the discussion. The way we're going to work this, just so everybody knows, is we'll keep everybody apart from me and Paul on mute. I know Paul will have some questions, I'll have some questions. It'll be fairly free-flowing, but if we can start off, a bit about you, Phil, and a little about the importance of having these digital skills on a board, and how important that is as businesses move forward if they're going to scale up.
Yeah, sure.
Over to you, Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Paul, for the intro. So, hi, everybody. So, Phil Mail. I'm a software engineer by trade. So I started programming computers probably back in the late 70s, for God's sake. I'm only 25, but it's just grey hair from all that. Right? Yeah. Software engineering degree, and I still write code today. So I still spend my time when I can writing bits of code. I started my first business straight out of university. It was a digital news agency at a time when there wasn't any digital news agencies. And we grew from about, well, 2 of us in a room above a betting shop in Hull, of all places, to about 800 people, and supplying about 78% of the UK's newspaper content in just under 18 months. So it just exploded. We used to do everything that wasn't news, so TV listings, racing pages, football results, you name it. Sold that business to Her Majesty's Press Association, and then I ended up inside the PA, running that in Fleet Street. So the sort of tender age of 26, I was sat in the middle of Fleet Street bashing away with all the old newspaper hacks. But in the background, we were still writing code and still doing things to write software to manipulate content, and a bunch of my mates from university, is the way I'll probably describe it, were sort of scattered around in various businesses, and we wanted a way to communicate with each other. And while we've been at university, we've been playing around with some very early stage internet type technologies in America, and we built literally a shed in the back end of Finchley, which is about, I don't know, 2 miles from where I'm sat right now. Put a load of phone lines in and built a load of modems, and set up a dial-up system and allowed people to dial in from their home computer. Strapped a connection up to a university that was in London, and then across to California, and that's why we were the first people on the internet in the UK. After a while, that reputation of that little setup grew, so I quit the media industry and went back to doing a startup. Literally in a shed in Finchley, and that business was Demon Internet, and we sold that after, well, it was what, 250,000 subscribers across the UK. We were about 10% of all telephony traffic in the UK was going to our shed in Finchley, all phone calls, and we sold that business to Scottish Power, who gave us Scottish Telecom to go and play with at the tender age of, what, 28. Banged those two together, and then IPO'd it on the London Stock Exchange for a couple of billion quid. Ran that for 10 years, FTSE 100, until Cable and Wireless came after us because we annoyed them too much, and they took us out, and I ended up running Cable and Wireless for a couple of years, and then splitting it, delisting it, and then re-IPOing the two halves again. Did that, and then private equity started picking up the phone, and since then I sort of quit Cable and Wireless, and I do a lot of PE deals now. So I've done, what, 17 private equity deals in the last 6 years, mostly tech, mostly high growth. I have about, well, at the moment I have 3 sort of standard day jobs. So I'm also the chairman of Jersey Telecom, which is a small but perfectly formed telco like BT on the Channel Islands. Not particularly unique or clever, other than we ripped out all the copper on the island and put fibre everywhere. So everybody in Jersey is on full gigabit internet. There's not a single bit of copper left on the island, and we did that, finished that programme last year. I'm also on the board of a company called Smart DCC, which is probably the biggest company you've never heard of. So we are we're doing the smart meter rollout. So I'll duck now. So smartening up the energy network in the UK, we've spent about £16 billion so far building a complete new, from the ground up, IoT network across the UK. And we will be coming to your house soon. Trust me, I promise. When we get there. And I'm also on the board of Z Internet, just to keep my sort of hand in the internet and ISP world, which is I'm actually more than happy to talk about, because it's a completely different sort of business. Zen is a business that is run as essentially as a community project. We've just gone through the B Corp certification, if you know what that is, which is about ensuring that the company does good for the community and the environment and the stakeholders, and not necessarily generating profits for the shareholders, which is quite an interesting process to go through and quite an interesting way to run a company. But that's sort of the intro. Look, most of my background is technology. I usually get involved in technology businesses or businesses that could benefit from technology. It's usually quite disruptive stuff. Which is an easy thing to say, but most of the disruption that I sort of, or the businesses that interest me are disruptive in their use case rather than their particular bent on technology. It's not hard to understand why. When I'm in a lucky position, I guess I get to get involved in businesses that interest me. So if there's a particular management team or a particular thesis or a particular theory, then I tend to get involved in it for that reason rather than anything else. It's I get a lot that come across my desk, I guess. And I think when I sort of sit back and think, well, what do I have to think about every day, and what I tend to look at, there's sort of 4 or 5 big trends that I try and ride the wave of. Is the easiest way of explaining it, and they're not rocket science. They're just big immovable trends that businesses that can surf them tend to be better businesses to be in. And if you look at it just from a very sort of 30,000 foot view, and then I'll just dive in a little bit. We're on a planet that's growing population. There are about 7.8 billion people on this planet right now. It's doubled in the last 40 years, and it was 1 billion about 200 years ago. And as population increases, resources become scarce. We get different political pressures and different supply chain dynamics and different movements of goods and services around the planet. And it's quite interesting to sort of ride those kind of waves, things that make the human population more dynamic, or make it more reachable, or allow products and services to get to wider markets. So that also has an effect in terms of shift of economic power. We'll see about 30% of GDP, of global GDP, shift across to China from the USA over the next 20 years. So anything that we can do that looks east rather than west is another big theme for me, and things that we look at. I think the other big thing is obviously just the environment and sustainability. It's becoming an ever-increasing topic. Just how we look after each other and how we look after the planet is a big theme for me, and a big way of stimulating business growth at the moment. And just about every business I'm in, we've got some angle on that or some bent on that in some way, shape or form. I think the third thing that is obviously just technology change. And there's just a massive amount of it going on at the moment. And if I was to sort of point at, my top 5 right now, particularly in the UK, bandwidth is just set to explode right now. We've got major initiatives going on in terms of 5G. 5G is coming at you like a train. The UK will fibre up every home. It will get there by hook or by crook. And, you know, I'm sitting here, I mean, again, I'm lucky, but I'm sitting here in a flat with 2 gigabits of internet in it on 2 bits of glass. And it just transforms the way that I use all my stuff and the way that I work and the way that I do things. So it's completely, you know, just, there you go, that's Alexa kicking in. And it just transforms the way that you live and the way that you use this kind of stuff. So anything that rises the bandwidth makes it more deployable, makes it more easier to use, makes it more integrated into the home environment, makes it more integrated into the community is a good trend that I obviously follow. AI is another one that I flag up. Massive amount of change going on in terms of just the capability of software systems generally. Businesses that are backed and involved in that are things that I look at quite carefully. And then IoT, which would be my third big sort of tip of the moment. There are about 25 billion devices connected to the internet at the moment. All the estimates that I look at tell me that that's going to be about 125 billion by 2050. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot higher. There isn't a single business that I'm involved in that doesn't have some form of IoT/data/collection program going on right now. And it just changes the way you have to think about your company and the assets that you've got and the way that you work. I think the other sort of key theme for me at the moment, and just a general sort of more related to Ned points more than anything, is that just about every business I'm involved in, and particularly with the COVID situation, I mean, we have just weaponized an entire working community in 6 months globally, you know, with technology. And if anything, all it's done is brought the trends of what we were seeing anyway being forecast forwards, whether that's the impact on retail, whether that's how you work from home, whether it's the technology you've got in your home, whether you're used to using these kind of software packages. And when we all jump on a Zoom call, you know, we wouldn't have done that 8 months ago. It was just unheard of, and it wouldn't have even been socially acceptable to do it. So literally the way that COVID impact from a working perspective has just brought technology to everybody and blurred all sorts of things. You know, I mean, you're looking into my home, right? And I'm looking into your homes. And the number of video calls I've been on with kids running in and oh, just let me go and get the door because there's a delivery. All that sort of stuff just blurred the social boundaries around how people interact and what technology can do. Things that we have been seeing as trends for some time. So technology is just becoming so pervasive. It's embedded in every single company. And I always use this analogy, you know, there's a whole pile of legislation and requirement and understanding around finance. You know, I sit on God knows how many boards these days, and you know, we've got to have a financially qualified director, we've got audit committees, we have financial auditors, we publish our accounts, la 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 la. And it's the accumulated knowledge of you know, hundreds of years of people being in business that they look after the numbers, because ultimately the numbers affect every stakeholder and the supply chains in and out of any particular business. So of course they're critical and important, and understanding how things move around and how business is profitable. But the same is now true of technology. I shift goods, services, I impart data to people, they make decisions based on it. And there's a danger that I can poison them by sending them wrong information or sending them viruses or not interlinking with them in the correct way. And yet there is zero legislation or requirement or knowledge or understanding about having a technically savvy person around the board table. There's absolutely zero. And I just find it breathtaking that companies don't think like that. You cannot be in business today without using this kind of stuff. You just cannot do it. You cannot be in business without being online. So why isn't there a requirement to have somebody who's technically competent? So those are the sort of general themes that I'm looking at, you know, just technology, changing world around us, and environment and sustainability. They're the sort of big three things that I get involved in. I think there's a darker side to that as well, because all of those things are great opportunities, but they also have great downsides. I think the other sort of common theme that I get when I talk to people about technology and the ideas of how to grow their business is all about the risk side of it, about fraud, cybersecurity, data protection, GDPR compliance, and all of those big topics. And yet it's another reason to have somebody that is technically literate on the board table. So most of the companies that I get involved in, I'm either the technical Ned that's sitting there with the brain that's wired that way, or if I'm the chairman, I make sure there's somebody else there who can play that role as well, because if I'm chairing a company, it tends to be quite a technology focused business. As for growth and sort of things that I'm involved in at the moment, I'll say it's quite a range of businesses. I think the most interesting one is actually based out of Manchester, which Paul knows. It's a company called Mist Group, which is a hosting business that I got involved in, what, 3 years ago now. You know, when I got involved in that business, it was doing about $1 million of EBITDA. 3 years later, we will run rate out this December at 30 million of EBITDA. Just to show you the sort of growth curves of some of the businesses that I get involved in. And Mist Group is currently, it's a hosting business. It provides internet fabric for people who want to get online. And guess what? Right now, everybody wants to go online. So we're currently growing at about 72% organic growth across that business. We're now in 17 countries. We started in 1 country. And just managing that pace of growth with a small team, very dedicated focus, raising capital to support that. Very happy to talk about if that's of interest to people. And then again, I guess the other sort of big theme thing that if I was to sort of look at some of the businesses, it's just about how leadership is getting their head around all this. And a lot of boards that I sit on are just really struggling to understand pre-post COVID, how to roll technology into that, how to deal with some of the risks that they've probably gone too far on when they've had to deal with COVID. You know, they've just, you know, pick up your laptop and go home is great because it gets people working, but you've just destroyed your data protection policy and any kind of security implications or security controls that you had. So people that are now trying to deal with a new normal, and I hate that phrase, but trying to tidy it up is the other sort of big area of discussion at the moment. Is that correct?
On that one, Phil? Yeah, so, I was going to say there, Phil. Actually, if we focus now on that one, because that's common for everybody, isn't it? I think all businesses have changed over the last 8, 9 months from the impact of COVID. It's actually interesting. I was on to a client today in a logistics business, and he talked about he's heard of this new role called head of home. So businesses are now recruiting a head of home, someone who looks after the whole home, how we make sure people are effective from home. I was like, oh, wow, that's a first for me as well. But could you just talk a little bit about how you've supported, advised businesses that have had to make this shift and some of the problems you've seen people face or businesses face with this sudden shift, dynamic shift for people working at home, and some of the solutions you put in place?
Yeah, so I mean, pick up your laptop and go home was the immediate reaction of most businesses that I was involved in, and generally it worked, and surprisingly it worked. I think it was a single company that I got involved in that didn't express surprise at how smooth and easy the transition was. You know, there's the few odd individuals who don't quite have a good, you know, home broadband, but pretty much most people's daily working activity continued. You know, because they were sat in an office in front of an Office 365 terminal and it just worked. And the only new thing they had to do was to figure out video conferencing. Everything else was perfectly capable. The hardest part of all of that was accessing file storage. I think was the biggest challenge most people faced, or just internal applications. Not many companies had deployed proper grown-up VPNs at scale. You know, secure networks and ways of connecting in. But that was quite easy to overcome. That's pretty turnkey technology. So getting people tuned up for that was quite easy. The reliance on the Zoom and the Teams of this world, you know, they had some teething problems, but pretty much that went quite smoothly. So for most businesses, it wasn't that much of a pain. There were some bumps and dips. The problems now is now how do you sustain that, right? Because you've just literally scattered everything onto home computers and data's flying about all over the place. The security isn't right, you know, and the amount of fraud that we're seeing, particularly in the telecoms businesses that I'm involved in, and some of the compliance where we've got legal compliance on a few things is astronomical, absolutely astronomical. So most businesses that I'm dealing with, we've set up. We sort of did a two-step dance really. There was a VPN service set up, so let's make sure that people can actually connect to us and get to our internal applications without having to worry too much about how that works. That was a fairly smooth transition. The second thing was, how do we get video conferencing on scale and get people online and in the calendars sorted, and just basic things like that for people who weren't used to doing it. And third phase, I guess, is the tidy up, which we're now in. So it's about how do we start looking after data protection, what do we do about documents, how are we doing things like email scanning, making sure that everybody's got virus on it. There's one company that I've helped out recently where they're now closing their office because they've just decided this is nonsense, we just don't need offices anymore. And the money they're saving, they're going to give to the employees as relocation expenses. So they've said to every single employee, you can move anywhere you like. You can go anywhere in the world you like. You pick a broadband connected place. That's all it's going to have is you sort out the broadband, and you've got to make sure that the house has a dedicated office room where you can work, and we will pay all of your moving expenses. And they're doing that by just closing all their offices. And that's just the way they've gone. But that's just one extreme. But sorting out people's home environment so that it is conducive to work is going to be part of the mop-up here, and it's going to be a permanent feature, I'm convinced.
Yeah, and then when you're forming a tech strategy for that, so this shift of, right, I mean, we're looking at our business in terms of that whole balance of working from home and working in the office, and whatever the new norm looks like for your business, it's then a tech strategy to support it, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's cloud, it's private servers, and it's dedicated server stuff. I mean, it's the only way you can go. So there's a combination of, again, depending on your data compliance requirements. But if you're handling sensitive data, commercial or legally sensitive, then you've got to go for a dedicated server implementations. Pick your favorite hosting company, pick your favorite location, and pick your geography based on your legal requirement. If it tends to be an internal business process application, Office 365, Zoho, and the other types are the way that everybody's going. And the trick here is to do it quickly.
In a sense, Bill, a lot of what's been going on has been reactive, though, hasn't it? I mean, they've been reacting to circumstances. Suddenly, people have got to work from home, so you send them home with their laptop, etc., etc. So there's a bit about this as well, which is, how can you be proactive as well in terms of some of the disruptive stuff and actually taking advantage of what's out there? I don't know whether this company that's getting its people to work from home, whether that will ultimately be an advantage to them. I mean, they're clearly putting cost into that in the sense that they're helping people move. But what's the proactivity that people can put into this as well as the reactivity?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's reactive to start with, right? But yeah, it's now turning on its head to be a bit more proactive, and I think a lot of that's to do with management rather than technology, to be honest. And it's about an attitude. So, it's quite noticeable that a lot of the management and board conversations that I'm now in are output based. We're having very little conversation about how and where and when. We're having what is the output. A lot of the task processes and the way that we're tasking organisations is in teams. So we're looking at restructuring, not in teams organised around task rather than teams organised around function, and tasking people to produce output. We don't really mind how they get there, because the other thing about working from home is that people are working different hours. It's completely fine for people to just, start at 6 in the morning and take a break at 10 and come back at 2 or whatever it is that they want to do. And it's just become the accepted way of doing things. So the output is the key requirement. So flipping the management processes around output focused management tasking rather than process or checking in on people from when did you log on at a certain time? Did you log off at a certain time? Those kind of things. I think from a technology perspective, just making sure people have got enough equipment. A lot of companies are tightening up the broadband. There are things you can do. In terms of running VPNs and separating the bandwidth on a broadband circuit, just to make that a little bit more easier, because obviously, kids are running around with PlayStations and all the other streaming Netflix and all that kind of rubbish. And there's some basic things that we've done in some companies, even as simple as, you know, setting up the guest Wi-Fi link on the router, and using that for work because it is a separate channel to the main Wi-Fi. I mean, silly things like that we've had to get done just to get things done. But being proactive is more about getting the data and the workflow processes changed, and management on output, management only on output.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that, Phil? Because this is yeah, I know it's weird, isn't it? Some of the simple stuff is actually some of the most effective. So I have got 2 kids, and FIFA 21's just come out this week. Believe me, they will be on that 24/7.
Yep.
And actually, therefore, this does create a bandwidth problem at home. So could you just talk me through very quickly how that either the guests, or what's the best solution from home to try and make sure the kids can be on one thing and I can be on something else. So that's hopefully some other people in this room are also technophobes like me, and this is going to be beneficial to them as well.
Yeah. So quick filter, right? So and this applies if you've got bandwidth, which is interesting. So if you're above sort of 20 megabits, all right, that's if you're below 20 megabits, you've got other problems, right? But
yeah, so I'm above that. Yeah.
Right, you're above 20 megabits. Most of the home routers out there that produce the Wi-Fi, so your BTs and Zens and whatever, will have a guest Wi-Fi on them that you can enable. That just says, you know, log in, and it just gives them straight access to the internet.
Right.
The way that's actually implemented on and sometimes it's turned on and sometimes it's turned off, depending on the ISP, right? But it's on the router. And the way that's actually implemented inside the router is that it's what's called a VLAN, a separate virtual network. So the traffic between the guest Wi-Fi and the main Wi-Fi don't mix. They don't interfere with each other, right? And most of the routers out there will time slice the outbound bandwidth by those Wi-Fi links. So all we've done in some places, we've changed the name guest Wi-Fi to work Wi-Fi, and then people connect to that, and they keep their traffic separated from the main home stuff.
Oh,
it'll give you a constant throughput.
That's giving my golden nugget for the day. And then the other one that I was very interested in, you obviously talked a little earlier about Miss Group, which is one of the key success stories of this year in terms of P investment. I think you were there when BGF invested, weren't you? And then you've taken it through Perwin, and now Perwin are on the next phase of scale up. But international, you've gone from 1 to, you say, 17 countries. A little bit of insight.
Well, actually, breaking news: 18 as of today. We just started
18. So quite a few of the people on the call today are, international aspirations, international strategies. Do you want to talk a little bit about putting together an international technology strategy to support that sort of growth, and what you need to think?
Yeah, and this is about rapid growth. So this is more about, you know, we're a technology business. So we sell a technical product and service to people who want to use it technically and put their websites up or their applications on things. That's what the business does. So there's sort of 3 tenets to that. One is keep it simple, we're stupid. So we've got most of our technology platforms in the background are very simple, very standard. We don't customize them. We try and stick to well-known components of the technology stack, and in the hosting world, there's some particular layers that we have to do. So things like disks, storage, processors, network, authentication, those kind of things, billing platforms. So we try to stick to those as just standard, well-known, well-understood, easily accessible platforms, so we can get access to programmers, technical people and operational people from anywhere in the world, because otherwise if we had our own bespoke secret sauce, it would be a nightmare. And in terms of taking the products overseas, we've made sure that we've got all of our back end unified, so all of our billing platforms and our provisioning systems and our support is one system. And then as we acquire or we branch out or we create a new brand in a new country, what we do is we localize. So we run localized marketing, change the language on the support, on the websites, tweak the brand if it needs a translation to local countries, but use the same back end. And if we acquire a business, and I'll give you an example of that. So again, hot off the press, we've just acquired one today. So we've just bought another hosting business in Lithuania for, I don't even think it's press release yet. I think we signed it about 3 hours ago. So we spent £60 million on that. and it has about 300,000 customers today. We will migrate all of their software and all of their customers onto our own technology platform. So their servers are doing what they do today. We have our servers in different countries. We will take 5 of their servers, put our software on it and start the migration, blow our software onto the next one, migrate, software, migrate, software, migrate. And we'll do about 300,000 customers in about 7 days.
Wow.
And that company that we've acquired won't exist in 7 days' time.
Right.
It will just be an extension of us, literally. And then we move on to the next one. And it's just about making sure that we've got a really, really robust, sensible, common platform that we can easily get people onto.
And a little bit of only because we've got Mr. Thompson's on here. So yeah, Lee has got a fantastic tech business that's doing an international scale up, and the big piece to them is going to be customer acquisition from an SME perspective internationally. Any tips when it comes to running how technology can support that side of it in terms of international customer acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, if you're buying building for customer acquisition, the key thing is to have a standard deployment stack. So you have a set of technologies that you know and love, and you don't take any prisoners. So we don't deviate. We only use the tools and systems and technology that we know. We typically do not buy, in our expansion, we've not bought companies overseas and used anything from them. We have literally just salvaged systems and networks and cables and hardware and deleted software. It's just not worth it. It's all about speed. It's all about speed.
And if you're organic, so if you're out there,
on the organic side, so on the organic side, what we've done is we've rolled up. We have a playbook. So we have a product set and a catalog and a support stack and support metrics and KPIs that we've defined the customer experience in terms of a KPI, both in terms of from a customer perspective. So how long to do a sign up, how many clicks to get to a product, how many rings before the phone gets answered, how many seconds before the message system gets, but it's all from the customer perspective. And then we literally take that playbook and we put it into the local support teams that we've acquired in country and say, that's what you've got to do. And here are the tools to do it. So here's a stack that we can point at in other locations that is already working and hitting that. Here are the scripts, here are the FAQs, here are the internal systems, the knowledge bases, or whatever it is that you happen to be deploying. But this is the customer experience we are defining. And we've if you like, trimmed and tweaked and adjusted that over the last 3 years to support our organic growth. And where we found it hampers, we've changed. Where we found it enhances, we've rolled out further. So
and you look like a man that's brave. So you talked before about the rise of the East and 30% of the GDP going across to that direction. So obviously, we'd as a business always like to leverage that. I'm guessing that you have. So if you were going to therefore point your business that way, organic, and not do it for a buy and build, not have local, what's your advice in terms of how we access all this rising wealth in the East then?
Find someone local that you can trust. That's number one. Absolutely. And I've done 3 business expansions out in that direction generally. And in fact, I've literally this morning, before you guys came on, I've just flown back from Ukraine this morning. Literally.
Why wouldn't you?
So find someone local you can trust, which is exactly what I was doing out there, because we're looking at moving into Eastern Europe.
And just Phil, take me on the journey of that. So how do you I'm sitting there thinking, right, okay, I need someone local in Ukraine. I wouldn't even know where to start to look. And believe me, landing in the Ukraine and walking around as a little man on my own, I think I'd be scared to death. I wouldn't come back. So take us through that little bit of journey of how you actually work out who to trust and how to do it.
So actually, that's incredibly easy, incredibly simple, to be honest. There's plenty of British trade support missions overseas. So we've used those in several locations, British Council, those kind of things. Okay. There's actually a company which I used to be advised to called Counterpoint.
Counterpoint.
Yeah, which are, they're for larger companies, but they help. So they have good contacts. So their job is to look at cultural risk. That's what they're, cultural risk assessors. So when I was running Cable Wireless, for example, one of the big projects we did was we spent about 800 million on WACS, which is the West Africa cable system. So this is digging a fibre down the west coast of Africa, basically, and then strapping into 17 countries on the way. They were incredibly useful to find us local people who could handle we're spending a lot of money in some pretty interesting places, who could handle things. And to give you an example of how interesting all these places get, we rolled out a mobile network in one of the African states, and our project plan for that, for every base station that we were going to install, we sent 3, because 2 of them would disappear in the logistics chain. But that was just the way it worked. So you just deal with it. But there are agencies around which can help you find it. There are also local trade councils, and a lot of people. It's quite easy to find, particularly in the banking world. Just people to go and talk to. And what I've been doing out in Ukraine over the last 3 years now, actually, is just meeting people, talking to them, finding out what they're trying to do, where their aspirations are, what the financial arrangements are behind the business they're running there, and all that kind of thing. We found 3 or 4 people in Ukraine now that are forming the core of our team, and we will send one of our people, quite junior, but just over to keep an eye on them as we build out there. But we've done the same in Indonesia, we've done the same in Malaysia, we're currently working in India at the moment. And obviously I've got a lot of experience in India from Cable Wireless. So we have 17,500 employees in India. I spend a lot of time out there. So there are support structures that can get you to these places, and it's worth pulling on them. And the banks are usually very helpful on that front.
Yeah, we did something in Kenya as a business, and actually when we went there, it was the banks actually that were probably the most helpful, and they then connected us with people to connect to. So before we knew it, we were meeting accountants, we were meeting bankers, and yeah, actually it was pretty enjoyable experience, all told. You've obviously also successfully raised finance and helped support businesses raising finance for tech, and obviously there is this whole world of sometimes tech and revenue don't necessarily, and tech and profit certainly don't necessarily sit together hand in hand. Do you want to just talk us through a little bit around advice for people who are looking to raise funding and capital for a tech-led business?
Yeah. It's a hot topic, right? And it's a very interesting one, to be honest, because I floated my first business in the middle of the dot-com bubble, and the world had gone mad. And I mean, even I was sitting there listening to some of the valuations that people were putting on things and thinking, you're just insane. I mean, just insane. It all calmed down a bit. And actually now, there's a fair amount of capital around. Private equity are desperate to place stuff into tech businesses at the minute. But there are some worrying signs. So we're seeing credit insurance increase, which is, the last time we saw credit insurance at these levels, it was sort of in the financial crisis of 2008, right? So don't expect this capital to be readily available, but it is available for the right things. And generally the right things are reoccurring service revenues right now. So if you have a business model which is, more than 2/3 of a repeatable book is the way that I'd normally describe it. So that you've got a forward pipeline of that sort of size. That's the sweet spot for most of the banking world that I'm speaking to. We've raised, we've done 4 acquisitions over the lockdown period, so since February. The largest one being the one we've just completed, and we've probably deployed about 130 million of capital that we've raised and deployed in the time since February. Right? And the key metrics that everyone has been keen to see in the business is our churn rates and our retention, so our recurring revenue lifetime value of customers. Nobody's really questioned what technology we're spending it on or why. It's literally been about annuity value of the customer base. Because in most of these tech businesses that are service based, if I stop, I turn it into a cash machine. Mm-hmm. So if I just let it run down, if I stop acquiring new customers and let it naturally churn away, I'm still going to repay anything and make a fortune for the guys who are lending me the cash. So generally, that's the metric that everyone's concentrating on at the moment.
What about when the business is now starting to be valued on data and information and this sort of side? Have you had much experience of that? But
this is a huge topic in itself, right? Because it's quite surprising. One of the private equity firms I work with has a large portfolio, not BGM, and we spend. Well, we did an exercise last year where we went across the portfolio looking for hidden value, right? And it was all about trying to find data. And I'll give you an example of one, just to show you how wacky this gets sometimes. But it's a question of having a look. So this particular private equity company owned one of the two big recycling companies in Europe. So there are two. One is in France, one's in Germany. And when all's said and done, when all the white goods and the washing machines and the fridge freezers and all the rest of it go through, various chains, they end up at one of these two. But pretty much they've had the market carved up amongst themselves 50-50 for the last 15, 20 years, right? And a private equity company bought one of them about 5 years ago, was sitting there scratching their heads trying to figure out how the hell they could get any value out of this. So we went to go and have a look at it. So these guys had some really interesting things. You can imagine what it was like: big scrapyard on the port, and the barges come up with piles of junk washing machines in them, and they tip them out onto the side, and a whole pile of people get to work stripping them down. But these guys had automated that to a degree, so they've got little computer terminals that would tell you that this was a Zanussi Model X washing machine, and you could recover this amount of copper and that amount of wiring and this amount of blah glass from it and that kind of thing. And they built that up so that every time one of these washing machines went through the system on the conveyor belt, people knew what they could extract from it quite quickly. They could get the screwdrivers out. This was the order. You took this machine to bits and off you went. But that's what they were doing. They deployed data and technology for efficiency purposes in their business. When you look at it though, they had 15 years worth of data about how washing machines and fridge freezers and ovens and microwaves can be recycled, right? So we said, okay, how about, right, you're fighting with these Germans, how about we go back to the washing machine manufacturers and we give them that data and we give them a star rating that says, this washing machine, by the way, 75% of it is recyclable. If you were to change this, it would be 85% recyclable and you get an A+ instead of an A-. Right? We give them the rating and the star for free on condition that the machine comes back to us for recycling 7 or 8 years later. Right?
Yeah.
Manufacturers loved it. They stick it on if you go to see a washing machine now, half of them have got these stickers on them that say this is a 83% A+ recyclable washing machine when you finish with it, and we'll take it away for free. Right? And we know in this French, as it happens, recycling business, that about 25% of the new machines that are out there are going to come back to us in 7 years' time. So in forward pricing that business against the German one that's been loggerheads with it 50-50 for 15 years, it will now be 75% of the market when they come to flip it out. And it was just the data they already had, and it cost us nothing to do that. Absolutely nothing. Just as a wacky example of where
it just shows how the data can really matter, can't it, from that side. So I was going to ask Chris about Q&A in a second, but these big questions, the key things we need to worry about and ensure we get right, have we covered those, or are you going to share those with us?
No. I'll sort of give you my top three that I think are the things that you should be thinking about. So if you're not online and you're not, don't have a digital strategy, for Christ's sake, get one.
Right.
I mean, you just cannot be in business these days without any kind of digital plan. I mean, it is insane and unthinkable, and any board that is sitting there without thinking, oh, it's not applicable to me, or it's, the digital plan we put in place for the recycling business, those guys just looked at us like we were insane when we said, what data have you got? But it's vast and it's huge and it's sitting there and it's waiting to be captured, and you just don't realize you've got it. Trust me, it is there.
Yeah.
So have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, damn well go get one.
Right.
The second one is, I guess, is find somebody who knows what they're talking about. Just find somebody you trust, whether it's the kid down the street, or whether it's an additional NED, or whether it's an advisor, or whoever currently provides your technology. Don't just ask them to fix problems or put new things in. Ask them to look at the business model and find out where the value is, because you'll be surprised. the people who spend their lives looking at technology think about the world in a different way, and that is a good thing. That is a good thing to get that diversity of opinion on the model, right? And then the third thing is, this is here be dragons, right? Here be dragons. It's what they used to write on the edge of the maps when we didn't realise the world was round. This is uncharted waters. And we have leapt into it more so in the last 6 months than we've ever seen on this planet before. So there are ups and downs in this world. There is risk, there is threat. There are definitely bad people out there doing bad things that you've got to understand, right? And the real plea, I guess, is from a board perspective is if you're not managing this stuff with a risk-aware process, so using a sensible, grown-up adult, do this at home with adult supervision risk register, put that in place, for Christ's sake. Understand risk, be informed about it, and look at the value you're getting back from it. And the whole risk appetite, risk delivery thing is a whole seminar in itself about how you do that around technology. But understand that these things come with ups and downs. Somebody around the table.
It would be good if others had the opportunity to ask some questions. Nobody's actually put anything on chat, but if there are people who want to ask a question, I guess at the end of the day, I mean, one of the things that's really interesting to me is how businesses that aren't technologically adapt quickly. I mean, getting somebody in is not that easy. How do they do that? Where do they find them? And going back to your point about this legislation, I mean, people have finance directors because you have to have, you've got to put in your statutory accounts and all the rest of it. So you have to have finance people there. But having a technology, I mean, how do we move that forward? Because it's clearly key. Is that a government thing? Is it? I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah, and it's one of my big beats with the IOD, to be honest. So this year I've been banging on them. I won't tell you about my fight with the IOD, but for some time about this. And we now have a digital directors certification process in the IOD, hurrah, for the first time. Because I just think people just need to understand some of the basics. They just need to understand some of the basics. It's not hard. This stuff is not hard at that level. It's very hard if you want to write software, but it's not that hard to understand from a governance perspective. Right? In terms of getting online, I think there's a lot of myth around this. You know, if I think back to the days, you know, when we were in a shed in Finchley, technology mostly didn't work. It mostly didn't work. You needed techies to stroke every bit of technology every day to make it even limp along. These days, pretty much this stuff works. We've deployed technology at the consumer level, and that is the scale of that is just mind-blowing when you look at it. You know, 4.9 billion people online. I mean, that's just monstrous amounts of technology out there. And what is surprising from my perspective is that a lot of the technology that I'm seeing influence business today comes from a consumer technology deployed into business, not the other way around, which is where it used to be. You know, I'd have computers at work, and the PC sort of drove this way. But now the software architecture, the cloud, the distributed computing, the AI, the websites, and all that sort of stuff is coming out of consumer mass technology deployment land into the workplace. It's the other way around. And therefore it's a little bit more robust and a little more easy and a little more simple to set up. And it's actually quite simple to get some of this stuff up and running. Get yourself a website, get some processes behind it. It's relatively cheap. You know, you can get an app developed for your favorite business process for about £30,000 these days. You can get a dynamic website drawn up and built and deployed for under 20 grand now. So if you there really isn't a lot of excuse.
Phil, just to pick that one off, because one of the problems I think for people when you look at that, so app, website sounds great. The problem is that when you go out there to buy these things, because you're the user that doesn't understand it and doesn't know, you're shopping with people who have, even if they've got marginally more understanding than you, they'll sell you things. And at the end of the day, plenty of our customers, including us, have been burnt by this, where you've ended up investing in somebody. That, how do you make sure that the people you get into bed with when they're going to develop an app or they're going to develop the website for you, that they're actually capable and the best people to do it? What sort of things should you look for?
Killer question, Paul, to be honest. So yes, there are thousands of people out there that'll do this kind of stuff for you, and they'll do it with varying degrees of success, I'm sure.
Correct. So what's your tick box to make sure you pick the right one? There must be a couple of little tips you'd say. That just test these things if you're going to do it.
Yeah. So first off is check what they've done before. Speak to a client. Just get a recommendation, a personal recommendation from somebody else that they've worked with. Make sure don't do anything with anybody if they can't give you a reference, at least one, right? Second thing is that if they're overcomplicating or trying to do what you're trying to do with bespoke software, and those sort of words come out, I've got to custom write something. You know what? They're in the early days, if this is your first foray into this world, they're overcomplicating it.
Right.
You know, there are standard tools out there for most things. Most things, to be honest.
Okay, I've actually had somebody's come in and they're obviously fascinated by this this company that's shutting their offices and paying for their staff to move. They want to know what business that is and how they can make that happen, because surely people will want people to come back into the office ultimately.
No, so they don't. They genuinely don't. They're going to retain one office as a meeting room office. It's a private equity company. So they are literally just flipping everybody out, and they've just found that productivity is better with people working from home, and that's the maths they've done. They're sitting in a swanky office in the middle of Mayfair, and they've just woken up and said, we don't need a swanky office in the middle of Mayfair anymore.
So how do they? I mean, it's interesting. I go back to the session we had last time where. Malcolm, the guy we were talking to, was talking about culture and the need to have people within a business to develop a culture, develop the playing off each other, and so on. How would a company that's pushed all of its staff out into the nether parts of the world and living by the sea or wherever they want to, how do they get that culture together?
Yeah, so they've still got an office there that they're going to run as a meeting room, right? And they're still going to run events, and they're still going to do meetings within clusters of people's homes, obviously. But I've got the same problem when I was in Cape Wallace. We had 70,000 people in India, we've had 20,000 people in the UK, and you could never get them all together, and you could never get them all in the same office. And to be frank, we were functionally splitting them into offices. Culture isn't just about getting people face to face. It's also about how you task, run, and interact with the business. You as leaders have got to figure out what sort of culture you want and how you want to run that. And I'm not so sure that the culture that we had, as a traditional sort of command and control type structure, a hierarchical, functional based workflow model, is going to be the way of the future. I just don't think that's the way that people are going to work.
Right.
I think this is a long-term change. Change. This is more about task and output. Somebody once said to me, as an interesting little thought point, is the most robust organisational structures in the world are terrorist groups. They are terrorist cells that operate completely independently in small teams with a common purpose.
Yeah. And
you can break up a team, but they're still incredibly effective as an organisational structure. And I'll give you one example of how we took that thinking. We in Cape Wallace used to have a provisioning team, about 400 people, and their job was to take a customer order and provide a lease line at the end of it. And there were 72 steps in the middle, right? Or ordering equipment, checking that we could dig into a particular building, checking the right powers available, where the customer wanted his rack, where the field engineer could turn up, yada yada yada. And we were provisioning circuits in about 110 days. So the average to go through that process was 110 days, which is stupid. I mean, it's just useless. So we took those 400 people and we split them up. Instead of them each doing a little bit of the 72 steps, we split them up into teams of 5 and gave them the whole order. And we said, look, here's your customer. There's his name, Phil. Here's his phone number. And you've got to get a lease line into his building over there as quickly as you can go. And we gave that team of 5 the whole thing, all 72 steps, repeat it, and then ran, you know, league tables between them. Our provisioning times went down to 62 days.
It comes back to your point, doesn't it, Phil? Is have a plan, isn't it? So you think about these things. It's then if you're going to make these changes, just have a plan.
You know what you back down of it, and I think people just work differently today. They just have a, you know, the tool set you can deploy, the way that people learn, the way that you can store data and repeat processes and repeat, you know, steps and learn and build that knowledge into process engineering is completely different these days.
Yeah, I've got another question here, Phil. We'll do 2 more questions and then we're going to have to call it a close. But somebody said it's interesting your point you made about the standardization of platforms and the process on an international rollout.
Yeah.
Is that the important thing? But the question is whether it's better to centralize customer service, marketing, and sales functions at the center, or have people run these operations?
No, good, very good question, and one that we thought about long and hard, to be honest. And what we found is that sales, marketing, and front end service, so human interaction service, let's put it that way, is absolutely culturally relevant and best done in country. And we don't put any of that into the center. So technology, finance, legal, HR, we absolutely pull into the center, and we run it from one location. But all of the front, anything that touches a customer with a human, and marketing, because they're not necessarily human most of the time, we do locally.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing. It's a think global, act local sort of thing, isn't it? Really. Completely.
Yeah. And more so, you know, one of the big changes of COVID, to be honest, has been people's understanding of what is community. You know, globally, we've seen that. So in the, you know, the world was starting to think about the world, and all of a sudden, the world's starting to think about my town. And that's been a very big change.
And Phil, how do you achieve that if you haven't bought a business out there? So again, just coming back to that, it sounds like the right strategy, but let's say it's organic growth and you want to put a team together in a country that you're not used to, or it's new, or it's where, how do you manage that piece?
So we've done 3 countries, we've done 3 countries where we've not acquired to go into the country. So we've literally we relocated one of our people to that country, and then we recruited locally and built the team from scratch.
Yeah, good. But that was the point I was looking for. In our previous business, we did some international, and we did exactly that. Someone you trust, take them out of this country, move them out there, get them shipped up.
Come back once you've built up trust locally. But exactly. That's what we've done.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, really good tip. Thanks for that. Lee, does that answer the question there, Lee? Just to cover those, any extra on that, Lee? You're okay?
No, I've just ripped up my strategy and started again. Thanks, Phil.
That's a great nugget. I mean, I'll give you another example. So I used to be CEO of a company called UK2. We had similar sort of business model. It was hosting, but we did everything out of Utah in the US. Now we did it in Utah because it's Mormon country, apologies if anyone's a Mormon, but and I love them to death. But you know, we had a lot of people who were very fluent in various languages because they all go missions all around the world and then they come back, and so they get taught languages. So we had every language that you could ever possibly want. It doesn't matter how abusive a customer gets. These people thought God was on their side, and they'd had all that abuse in the past anyway. So they were perfectly fine dealing with the customers. And we tried doing it centrally. The problem was that they just didn't get the culture. So they might be able to speak the language, and you might be able to do the understand the nuances of it, but they hadn't watched the same TV programs. They hadn't read the same newspapers every morning. They hadn't experienced in the street what was going on. And COVID's made it 10 times more local, literally 10 times more local. The number of meetings that I get on with video calls and people say, how is it near you? And we started this call like that. You know, a little flipping joke, Paul, are you going to be able to get home tonight because you're in Manchester? But Manchester's become the top conversation, not the UK.
Yeah, and the fact that you know that. So the quick, just so we don't cut this one off, Chris. Phil, I'm going to jump to Phil, and you can go back to Ben. But Phil, who kindly joined and brought his CMO with him. Tips on accelerating a market towards online buying. I know why you're asking this, Phil. When it's lagging behind your digital strategy and customer tech.
Customer tech. Well, I mean, that very much depends on the tech. But look, I mean, so if you're talking about marketing strategies right now, you know, I mean, there's the handle turning of the Google and the SEO world, right? I mean, you turn the handle on that and you play it as hard as you can, and you know, and it depends on the keywords you're playing. So, you know, again, in the hosting world, I think web hosting is the 9th most bid on Google keyword set. So we have 3 teams of people around the world, actually, in different locations, doing follow the sun on bidding for web hosting on Google SEO PPC type world, and we're doing that every 30 minutes. We're putting new pricing into that. But the most effective thing we found so far is getting a social media presence and building up a referral base. So I've got an interesting model I could show you. I'm not sure how to do it on here, but which talks about the sort of, we classify customers and potential customers in about 17 different categories, and then we tie them together based on their social media and their website and their PPC interactions, and then we look at where we've got the bulk of customers and how do we move them across from one. How do we move them across from things like a recruit to a repeat customer? And we do that with targeted content drops, DIY guides, how-tos. Do you remember in the old days, if you walked into B&Q and you wanted to, I don't know, build a window in your wall, you could go to this little DIY thing that had a little pamphlet that said how to knock a hole in your wall and put a window in it. By the way, you need these components from, you know, row 57 and aisle 53 and all that kind of stuff. We do a lot of that. Right. So we do a lot of what you're trying to get to is this. So, you know, well, if you're trying to get a website online, you need these components. These are the products you do. This is the commands you type. This is the clicks you make. This is how you get there. And once you've got somebody through that journey, they're the biggest advocate you can ever get because they're proud of what they've done. So we deliberately leave things in some of our technology products and services where people need a little bit of help. And if we can give them that little bit of help, then they own the product more and then become more advocate about it and start posting and promoting. So it very much depends on what particular technology item you're trying to get out there. But if it's a repeating service thing, give them end states, give them steps along the way that they have to do to add value to it, and make sure that you give them guides to get them there.
Phil, does that answer the question there? Phil, does that give you what you need?
I talked to you about hours about that. There's a whole world of that.
Yeah, brilliant. And just to finish on, because we've gone way over our time, and we've lost 1 or 2 on the way as a result. But
not many though, because it's been interesting. That's why.
I'm not going to make excuses because I think people are really enjoying this. It's been very, very helpful. So just the last one, which I think is sort of quite pertinent, is how do you advise a customer which is tech shy to embrace more advanced technology when they view technology as a solution rather than a cost?
Well, there's several techniques, right? So the first is, if it's a business, I tend to try and scare them, and it's quite easy to scare them. You know, it is quite easy if a business does not have a digital strategy. It is really easy to show them why they should, and what's going on the internet, even though they don't probably even see it. If it's an end user customer, so for example, you know, we've got in Jersey Telecom, we're you know, pushing out fibre to the home and, you know, voice over IP phones and video conferencing, all that sort of stuff. And we've got a population which is generally towards the older end of the spectrum, let's call it that way, and a bit reluctant to do some things. So a lot of that we focused on use case. So this is, you know, you want to stay in touch with your relatives, or you want to stay, you know, you want to be safe at home, or you want to have trouble-free access to the internet, or be protected, or whatever it might be. But it's a use case statement for an end customer. What is the point of the technology, not what is the technology?
Right.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's really helpful, Phil.
Yeah.
I mean, we did talk about this earlier before we came on the call, but are you happy to take any email questions that might come through? And if somebody wants your contact details, well, you've got your little piece on the internet, which we didn't actually mention, but Phil, if you Google Phil on the internet, you'll find he has a little a little website of his own which tells you all about Phil. So, and I think your contact details are on there as well, Phil.
Yeah, and you can mail me on that as well.
Yeah, so it's brilliant. All right, well, but thanks very much for that, and thanks to everybody who's joined us. Hopefully you found it really helpful. Thanks for being very open, Phil, and very informative as well. I've learned a lot, I know, and I hope everybody else has as well. So thanks very much for that, Phil, and thanks, Paul, for you were probably more involved in that than I was expecting, but I think you were really taken with it as well. So
well, I quickly worked out, Chris, that tech's not your forte, so I thought I'd better step in a little bit. So if you have got tech problems out there, guys, then call the NED for NEDs, and he'll point you in the direction of Phil.
Or Paul. All right. Well, thanks very much indeed. And,
yeah, brilliant. Enjoy your evenings, everybody. Safe trip home if you're allowed to.
All the best.